Will you thank Mariah and Michelle? It takes so much courage to disclose real life in front of your church family and others, and I so appreciate these last 3 weeks. The stories that we've heard of people who have just disclosed. Here's my story. This is what I have been, and this is what Jesus is doing in my world, in my life. So if you need to catch up a little bit, why are we telling this story or past stories of addiction, is because it's the subject matter, like some churches, it's hard to talk about. And so it kind of just sits there, and maybe the assumption is, well, it's probably not real for us, but it's real for us. It really is. And so we've done this hard thing these last 3 weeks of putting it on the table, but not in a way that, try to poke someone in the eye or shame them into something or add like weight and guilt, but to bring hope to it, to say Jesus can meet you there. So you can't hide from him, nor would he want you to, but he also doesn't approach us with this condemning voice. But he wants to restore us, and he wants to renew us, and he wants to bring wholeness to our lives wherever we find ourselves. And that's been the hope these last 3 weeks. So where it began was some stories that came to light that I started to hear, and then a group of people that I knew some of their stories just kind of got together and said, we have to do something. And so we began this journey of thinking through what we might do. And so what we decided to do was to dust off a 90-year-old prayer that's become kind of synonymous with recovery and restoration and the kind of a world of addiction. And it actually has a name, the Serenity prayer. And if you've been in a 12-step group or something, you know it very well. And it's been kind of our guide through these last weeks. And it starts this: God, give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, and give me the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So week 1, we talked a little bit about the serenity to accept the things that I can't change. And if you're caught in addiction, do you know firsthand that you can't change it? It just feels impossible to change it. But there's a serenity that comes when that admission happens. But then it takes courage, which was week 2, to actually step out and go, okay, I am now going to take a step. I'm going to make a huge what feels risky decision. Courage is going to have to be mustered up, and I'm going to get help for this. And so this week we want to look at the third part of that, the third stanza, the wisdom to know the difference between what? Well, on one hand, I guess the difference between what I can change and what I can't, but what I'd like to do is go back to the story of Mariah and Michelle. The wisdom to know when you live with someone who has an addiction or compulsive behavior, the wisdom to know, do I confront it and take it on and let happen what happens? Or do I accept and hope that my loyalty and my love and my faithfulness will turn the day? What do I do? Like, what's the right thing to do? Both Michelle and Mariah talk about their own experience of reaching a place where they said, we can't do this any longer. And consideration at the very least is to take their children and to leave their husbands. Because, well, just for themselves on one hand, for the health of their own lives, but maybe this is what he needs. This kind of line in the sand, no more. You see, the reality is with addiction is that the addict never has the addiction by themselves. There's always somebody around that experiences the collateral damage with it. It's a spouse, it's children, it's parents, it's friends, it's colleagues. Very, very, very seldom does the addict live in isolation to that. But then what's the wise way to handle that if you live with that person? As I speak to spouses and friends, and I have had some friends myself that have gone through this, you know the hurt of one more false promise. I'll stop. And then it doesn't stop. And eventually those promises mean nothing. I think I just need to draw the line in the sand, say no more. Whatever happens, just leave. Let him or her do whatever they're going to do, but I'm out. I've talked to some spouses and friends who say, I just don't have a feeling of love for that person anymore. They have hurt so often and damaged so much that I just don't even feel love for them anymore. And I'm in that place of desperation, but I don't know what's right. I don't know what the wise thing to do in this is. So for today, what I would like to do is look at, as we have throughout the last weeks, I would like to look at a story, an incident from the scriptures. And like the last weeks, it's not an incident that involves addiction. But hidden in this story are some principles of wisdom of what to do when you're with someone who's caught in something that they seemingly can't get out of, and it's self-destructive at the very least, but probably destructive to others around who get splashed with the toxic stuff that goes with it. And what do? Do you go guns blazing and go in and blow the thing up and go, this can't happen any longer, and whatever happens, I'm out of here? Or do you go, no, if I just am faithful and I'm consistent and I'm accepting and gracious and loyal, that'll change the thing. What do I do? So in spite of this story not being about addiction, it is a story of someone who has some wisdom in that very setting that I think we could learn from in our everyday lives, whether we're in the addict culture or not, but specifically this morning in that kind of culture. So it's a familiar story. When I read it and talk about it a little bit, you'll recognize it. If you're a student of the scriptures, you'll recognize it. It's a profound and wonderful story. It's about the wisdom to know the difference and the choice between condemning bad behavior, if you will, and accepting that person. So here we go. It's John chapter 8, beginning in verse 1. This is what it says. Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives. He had been in Jerusalem. Now he goes up to the Mount of Olives. But early the next morning, he was back again at the temple. A crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and he taught them. And this is what rabbis did. They sat and they taught whatever their mantle of teaching was, and Jesus is doing that. And while he's speaking, apparently, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act, or in the very act, of adultery. Now, let's stop for just a second here. We need to humanize this story a little bit, because those that are bringing her to Jesus are not humanizing it. She means nothing to them. She is an object for them to, just use. They don't care much about her, evidently. They are sorry for the state that she's in. They don't have any concept, it appears, of how she got to this place, that she would commit adultery. And that, apparently, she's just a pawn for them to use, but she's a real person. She has a story. We just don't know her story. It's totally reasonable to think that as a young lady, young teenage girl, she dreams of a day where her dad is going to pick, because that's how it worked. Her dad was going to pick her husband for her. And he would pick someone who's honorable, who's a good provider, who loved Yahweh and worshiped him, and would bring the family to places of worship and would be fully engaged, protecting and caring for the family. And it could just be she didn't find that particular husband. Her dad didn't pick that person. He picked somebody that was convenient, somebody that would be, help the family legacy, or a matter of diplomacy. We don't know her story. But at some point, she finds a guy, or a guy finds her, and they linger too long. They talk too deeply about personal things. There's a touch that communicates something further. There's whatever it is. They develop a relationship, and maybe just a friendship to start with, and then lo and behold, because she's not loved at home, she finds what she thinks is love in his arms, and it just goes further than either one of them expected. And then there's the day that they cross the line. They never planned on it, but they were having such a great time together and enjoying one another's company, and they get caught in the moment, and they do the deed, and she feels shame, and she feels guilt, and yet she can't talk about it, right? She doesn't want to blow up her family, because she knows the consequences. These are serious consequences. And then they meet again, and again, and again. Before long, it's a full-blown affair, and the love that she apparently finds in his arms and he in hers is just more than the shame has to bear. And so they carry on. She remembers the first time. She had never lied to her husband before, but this time she remembers exactly what she told him so that she could arrange to meet her new love. She went to church. She went to the synagogue every week and worshiped Yahweh as if nothing had happened. And she was sure that when she did, Yahweh would strike her and pay her back for this. For surely she was wrong and she knew it, but evidently Yahweh didn't do that. And so maybe he was just okay. He understood her loveless life and he was okay with it somehow. And she thought nobody knew. She knew at some point somebody would. But for now, I'm just going to carry on this way. We don't know her story. I don't know if that's the story or not. But she's a real person who has a real heart and a real longing and real wishes and real wants for her life. And she does something that undermines and corrodes the whole dream that she has. And then there is that fateful early morning where there's a knock on the door, and she and her lover are not decent, and before they can, the door slams open, and men walk in, and they grab her, and she cries for mercy, and she says, "Oh no." They wrap her in a linen blanket, and they haul her out to the street, and this is what we're told happens to her. They put her in front of the crowd. Can you imagine the humiliation? "Teacher," they said to Jesus, "this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say?" And they were right. That's what the law said. The law says in Leviticus 20:10 that if a man commits adultery with his neighbor's wife, both the man and the woman who have committed adultery must be put to death. Serious stuff, right? In Deuteronomy, we're told the law was, but you can't just do that without witnesses. And so these religious people were smart enough to go, well, we gotta spy, we gotta watch, we gotta look after, because we gotta bring evidence. Like we have to obey the law, right? Well, two questions. What laws did you break by being peeping toms? How long did you have to watch? What was in your heart when you were doing that? Was it to find restoration? Was it to bring healing to these families? No, it was to condemn. That was the issue. Second question, where's the guy? Right? They haul her out. Where's the dude? Because the law said it's both. So they break the law, trying to hold up the law. Who does that? Someone who has decided to take on a problem and condemn the people that are part of it. No mercy, no grace, no understanding, no kindness. We're just going to fix this. We're going to set this straight and make it right. These religious types are so bent on condemning this woman that they speed right past the opportunity to heal and restore. They've concluded that they are right, and in their rightness, they are going to use condemnation to help bring about a preferred outcome. They do not care about restoration. This is full-blown condemnation that they see will lead to retribution. But there's something else at work here. It isn't just her that they have focused their condemnation on to try to set something straight. We read in verse 6 that they were trying to trap him, Jesus, into saying something that they could use against them. Oh, this is really about Jesus. So they're trying to condemn him, but use her as a tool to get at him, and they condemn her by doing this. Is just rampant condemnation. So there she is, waiting to die. Guilty. Condemned, for sure. And then Jesus does this unusual thing. It says, but Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. What did he write? I mean, isn't that the question? What did he write? We don't know. But it's the only time in all of the scripture where we see Jesus write something down. And he doesn't write it on paper, and he doesn't write it on papyrus. He writes it on sand, so there's no evidence left behind for what he said. Only those that saw it knew what he had written. But it appears they didn't read very well. It appears they couldn't see exactly what he had written in the sand. In verse 7 it says, they kept demanding an answer as if they didn't even look at what he had written. So Jesus stands up again and says, all right, do it. Stone her. Like, take her out. You read the law right. Take her out. Oh, but just a sec, before you do that, one thing. Let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. I think there's a bit of a clue here as to what he might have written in the sand, because he's not done writing. And he stoops down one more time, and he writes in the dust. So what did he write? Don't you want to know? I do. It's one of my list of 10 questions I want to ask Jesus. The second one is, why did you keep Judas around? So what did he write? We don't know. I kind of lean myself, this is like, don't go to the bank on this one, right? I kind of lean to something that a 5th century historian suggested. He says, I think maybe what they wrote down, what Jesus wrote down in the sand was the name, the time, and the location of the sins of each one of those religious leaders around that circle. Maybe he wrote down Eli, Jaffa, 12th day, 11th month, 3890. Maybe he wrote Yitzhak, Ben Yehuba Street, 2 Nisan, year 3822. And each one of these guys would have known, oh, I remember that occasion. In fact, this historian would say, when it says that the first person who has committed not just a sin, but this particular one, you get to throw the first stone. Go ahead. You've condemned her already. You might as well finish the deal. But somehow this has caught their attention, what Jesus has said or written. In verse 9 we read, when the accusers heard this, whatever that was, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the women. They drop their rocks and they split. They take off. And what you have in that circle is disembodied rocks in a circle. No more people. Just Jesus and this woman. And then he does one of the most tender things, I think, in all of the New Testament. Jesus stands up again and he says to the woman, where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? Yeah, they all did. But she says, no, Lord. And then Jesus says to her, and here it is, then neither do I. Go and sin no more. There is something we need to learn from what Jesus says here. We have to learn this. And it relates to those of us who live every day in the presence of someone we love who is hooked on something they're caught in something and they can't find their way out, whether it's alcohol or drugs or pornography or gambling or chronic anger or technology, whatever it is. What are we going to do? Are we just going to go and condemn, straighten them out, fix them up? Are we just going to accept and go, oh, it's okay, it's all right, I'll hang in there with you and hopefully you'll catch it along the way? What is the wise thing to do? If we are really going to help those close to us, we must abandon the deeply rooted human practice of condemning and blaming. Condemnation and blaming have become so deeply ingrained in the human spirit that many of us can't imagine having to function without them. They're great tools of controlling people, of getting them to straighten up. Can we actually negotiate human relationships with people who are hurting us and themselves in their addiction without letting them know that we disapprove of them and find them to be wrong? Condemnation and blame are such large parts of the normal human experience that we may not be able to imagine and think what life would be like or how a person would possibly change without leveraging that. In small things and in big things, we are such condemners. Don't we at least have to have the option of giving the person a good dose of blame and condemnation when they need it? Do we not have a responsibility to straighten them out? They at the very least need to know that we're on the side of right, don't they? But what exactly is condemnation and blame? Well, blame is easy. Blame is this: you're responsible for me and my problems. The situation that we're in is my reaction to what you've already done. If you hadn't, I wouldn't. If you didn't, I would not have either. If you had stopped, I would have too. If you had gotten help, I wouldn't be leaving. That's blame. Condemnation is different and so much more deadly and simply never part of Jesus' repertoire for himself and simply not necessary for us. It's irrelevant to us. For those of us who have found Jesus and found what he has done for us and turned our lives over to us, do you know what we're told? Paul tells us in Romans 8, verse 1, there is now no condemnation. None. Zero. Zip. Nada. For anybody who is in Christ Jesus. That doesn't just mean the point when you are redeemed and made new spiritually. It means there's no condemnation that comes from us because none comes to us. It's an amazing truth of the Christian gospel. You see, what condemnation carries with it is this idea that the one being condemned is not just doing something wrong, but at a core level, they are damaged and ruined and worthy of being kept at a distance or removed or irredeemable beyond restoration, and at the very least are not worthy of restoration. Such is how the damage of condemnation. And what Jesus does to this woman, what he says to her, is really astounding. By telling her that he does not condemn her, he is not saying, hey, everything's good. You're all right. Don't worry about it. I mean, it was a little mistake. No big deal. Just forget about it. Go on. I'm so loyal to you and faithful, and it's all okay. Actually, that's not wisdom. And it's not love either. Nor is he saying, you really screwed this thing up, but hey, good news, I rescued you today. Look, I know I don't like what you did, but I can put up with you. I mean, I can tolerate that. I know you're just like, it's just weakness for you, and it's okay, I don't like it, but I kind of hang in there with you, and we'll go together. It's not good what you did, but I want you to know I'll endure this with you. That also is not wise, and it's not love, and it's not restorative. The path to restoration does not come through denial, tolerating, and for sure condemnation. It comes through wise acceptance. Acceptance of the person, as a faltering, failed, sin-stained, sin-prone person. Not the activity, the person. And condemnation will never allow us to accept the person. This is in what part made Jesus so magnetic to adulterers and swindlers and bandits and occultists, and to people who were simply deceived and lost and misguided and lost in chronic self-destructive activities. When messed up sinners came to the only sinless human who ever lived, he did not cavalierly brush off their sins, nor did he merely tolerate and endure them with patient resignation. He genuinely loved them as people that he was about to die for, compelled by his love for them. Because it was not a pathway to straighten them out, it was a pathway to restore them to who the God who made them saw who they could be. Acceptance is an act of the whole being. The body, the mind, the heart. It is saying that it is a very good thing that you are alive and that we are together in this moment. Without the caveat attached, however, your behavior is really bad. No, that may be true. But now that is acceptance with an asterisk. There are many ways to communicate this full-on acceptance, but one of the most potent is simply to listen with patience and compassion, and over time, over time, of that kind of consistency, create a safe place of genuine acceptance where the revelation of some of the darkest secrets and lost dreams can be brought to light. You see, addicts are people who do not easily reveal their secrets because they are certain there is some irredeemable quality about themselves. And people have been more than happy to tell them that over and over. They may, in fact, be expert condemners themselves. However, if they are ever fortunate enough to come across someone who listens and does not turn away in disappointment or disgust, someone who walks with them and more than tolerates or endures them, someone who sees the darkness and continues to love them, they may just be on a path of restoration. And this is who this woman finds. She finds someone like that. She finds Jesus, who of all people had the right to throw some stones. Because of all people, he saw clearly the inner workings of her soul and her life. He saw what she had done. He saw it. And he, with his perfect vision, says, I don't condemn you. Go and sin no more. And since this is Jesus' hope, he does something critical and essential for restoration to take hold. He gives her words that would cut to her heart because she knew they were true, but at the same time, oddly, they would bring hope and life to her soul. They fill her with pain because they reveal he knows about her, and she is exposed in that moment. And they're also oddly fill her with hope that someone knows and still believes in her. This is simply what he says, go. Which means, you're good. You go. And sin no more. He is not saying, go and don't commit adultery again. He is saying, go and don't spend another minute, not a second, not a millisecond of your life living independent of the love of God. Because what you were looking for in the arms of another man was the love of God. That's what you were looking for. Don't spend another minute finding it, looking for it, pursuing it someplace else. Go and sin no more. Go and don't live independent of God ever again, not for a second. Live in his love. Let him love you. Do that. So that's so much different than go and change your behavior, straighten yourself out. Because when you unconditionally accept someone, you don't accept their behavior, but firstly, you accept them. You accept them. And then with the wisdom of God and only with his help, do we now talk about the behavior and what is prompting that? Acceptance is not the same thing as accepting any behavior she chooses to indulge in. Sometimes people think that acceptance means the family and friends of the addict just accept the damaging consequences of excessive alcohol consumption or drugs or whatever it would be. That kids just have to accept the abandonment of a parent, or friends just accept what a friend does. It means accepting the financial cesspool that sometimes comes as a result of this, the physical, emotional abuse that comes from addicts that have hampered decision-making. It means accepting yet one more tearful apology. No, that's not what it means. It doesn't. Accepting another human being does not mean that we do not confront and challenge that which is in them and is causing such pain and corrosion and damage in them and those they love. But how do you do that? In fact, I would say failure to confront and patiently and clearly speak the truth with love in the end can be as damaging for a family as condemning and blaming. Jesus' expression of acceptance, go and sin no more, has more to it. While his acceptance is free, undeserved, even excessive in the views of some, it is demanding for this woman. And it is incredibly costly to him. These rock throwers, they're coming back with bigger rocks and more of them, and ultimately they will hang him on a cross. They will torture him, and he will go through unbelievable separation and pain, and then a glorious resurrection. He pays a price for her restoration. And so it is sometimes that acceptance comes with hard forgiveness. But there cannot be restoration without forgiveness. Acceptance does not mean that there's never a time for physical distance or boundaries or hard decisions of that, but why they're made. Are they condemning or are they restorative? So how can this be done? Can I give you 4 suggestions quickly? I'm doing it anyways. 1, if you're going to do this wisely, if you're going to stop and speak and with full acceptance of the person deal with the issue, you must do it with the power and the divine help of Jesus Christ. You can't do it otherwise. Your motives get mixed up. You say the wrong thing. You go into it just wanting to change some behavior. But the love of God actually gives insight and wisdom into things that we wouldn't know if he didn't inform us. So it must be done with him first. Secondly, the purpose of confronting is not to straighten them out or to get them to stop. It is about restoration, so check your motives before you do it. Thirdly, a conscious awareness that we have our own vulnerability and could get lured into the very same thing or worse that the person who is caught has been in. We are vulnerable people. We are weak. We must understand that because that removes any hint of superiority or retribution and makes the specter of forgiveness a possibility. And lastly, never do this alone. Never. You need colleagues, you need friends, you need family, you need others around you who can help not condemn, but accept the person and deal with what is happening. It's for that reason that we told you Michelle and Mariah's story, because they've lived that. And they've had to make hard but wise decisions with the help of Jesus to deal with addicts in their world. And as much as there's a group of men right now, and we're getting something together for women, and we'll announce that in the next few weeks. A group of people, men getting together Wednesday, which has just been so amazing. As 2 weeks ago, Wednesday, the host home that it's in, the next morning, Thursday morning, the owner called the furniture company to bring 4 more couches. And this last Thursday, ordered more couches. Because there are people who are looking for help. And they're finding it there on Wednesday. At the same time, Michelle and Mariah are meeting with the spouses to support them and to encourage them and to walk the journey that they have walked themselves, pointing them to Jesus, who is the author and the perfecter of our walk with God. Butch, why don't you come on up? The whole purpose of this short series, as I said at the beginning, right here, is to bring hope through Jesus Christ into lives of people who may have been suffering in silent desperation, looking for some help. Where do I go? What do I do? And we want to help. But we want to help support you if you're the person that lives with, is a friend to that person caught in addiction. So if you would be interested in finding that help, the gals have started something called Reveal, and you could email reveal@copperhills.org, and they'll get back to you, and they'll loop you in, and they'll help you. Reminder, again, if you're in that place of addiction and you are just at a place, I need help, the Restoration Project at copperhills.org, they'll get back to you, men or women. And though we don't have something for women right this moment, we will, as I said. You email that address anyways. We will not abandon you. We'll work with you till we have that in place. This is about bringing hope of Christ into really difficult settings, and he will do this, we believe. Would you pray with me? Now, Jesus, you are the healer, you're the restorer, you're the redeemer. Ask again, Jesus, you would do that throughout the hearts and minds of people who, even in this moment, are making a decision about what they're going to do and who are they going to call into this. We ask, Jesus, that you would heal and restore.